boy named Ray panted heavily, painfully trying to heal the large wound on his chest, desperate to prove his worth. The Yggdrasil Labyrinth, an SSS rank dungeon, was one of the 7 most difficult labyrinths in the world, a place that held secret treasures. After clearing an A rank dungeon a month ago, his party, Gunkino, had qualified to challenge this SSS rank dungeon. Each member of the party was incredibly talented. First was File, a dark mage said to carry the blood of ancient witches. Next was the sword Saintess Hymeno, an enhancement mage wielding dual swords imbued with the power of wind and lightning. The party also had a giant guardian with immense attack power, the great sword warrior Suglinst, who constantly craved battle. And finally, their genius leader Loki, who excelled in every field, from combat to magic and command. Ray was the party's healer, but he was treated with little respect. The guardian called Ray over to heal a minor wound on Himeno's leg. And though she refused, Ray healed the scratch anyway, revealing his fatal flaw. As he was nearly exhausted, collapsing onto Himeno's leg, she kicked him away in disgust, and Ray struggled to recover as the leader, Loki, quietly approached and handed him a potion to restore his stamina. As he drank the potion, Ray apologized for making them use their supplies and noticed the pitiful gazes from the other members. Himeno bluntly called him a burden, but Loki told him to ignore them and rest until he could stand. Ray's greatest weakness was his low magical capacity, which caused his mana to deplete and his body to weaken after just one simple healing spell. This severely limited the party's strategies, and he had no way to compensate for this shortcoming. Despite being seen as useless, Loki had still invited Ray to the party without explaining why. Ray had rejoined the group anyway, happy to have found the only place he felt he belonged, regardless of the ugly taunts. The party pushed onward to the next floor, aiming to be the first to conquer Yggdrasil and claim its secret treasure. After clearing an A-rank dungeon with ease, they assumed this quest wouldn't be too difficult either. But at that moment, the party was completely unaware of the true horror of an SSS rank dungeon, especially as they advanced to the 125th floor. Party Gunkino barely escaped with their lives, their weapons and armor completely destroyed. They never expected to face monsters on par with S-rank adventurers, when they had only encountered A-rank monsters until now, and the difference between them was like night and day. Himeno feared for her life, while File wondered why such powerful monsters had only appeared on that floor. Ray didn't dare utter a single word, afraid that everyone would take their anger out on him. Suglinst suggested they return to the surface, fearing the prospect of running into those monsters again. But having advanced too far, the party realized they had passed the point of no return. Loki calmly explained that the only way to return was to use the teleportation stones that they had found at the bottom of the A-rank dungeon. The group excitedly agreed, but they remembered that these were rare, single-use gems that would disappear after being used. They had 5 stones, enough for everyone, and each one was worth thousands of gold coins. However, Loki insisted that their lives were more precious than any treasure, and believed everyone would agree. Loki stepped forward and said that it was time, and Ray, mistaking it for a wise decision from his leader, felt a sense of admiration, thinking he could never be so decisive. But just then, to his horror, Loki approached and coldly kicked him out of the Gunkino party. Stunned, Ray stumbled back in confusion, unable to believe what he had just heard. Loki repeated his words, but Ray still couldn't comprehend it. Seeing this, an annoyed Suglinst threw a rock, hitting him in the face. Himeno then stomped on his hand, scolding him for always staring at her during battle. Before kicking him hard in the head, he tried to explain that he needed to watch everyone carefully to know who needed healing, but his words only earned him scornful looks from the 3 of them. And File simply turned away as usual. Loki stated bluntly that Ray was too weak to support them in battle, and often became a huge burden due to his limitations. Ray admitted that was true, but argued that he made up for it by analyzing enemy weaknesses, gathering information, and even doing menial chores. Unfortunately, Loki stressed that Ray didn't understand their true mission. They were the party entrusted with defeating the Demon King, and were even recognized by the king himself. With a weak mage like you, the party has no future, and you have to face that painful truth. In anguish, Ray asked why Loki had invited him to join the party. When he was just 11 years old, still a slave, he believed there must have been a special reason, desperate to protect his own worth. However, Loki's answer forced him to face a cruel reality. Loki said bluntly there was no deep reason. He just wanted a cheap slave who could heal. Back then, he was just a rookie adventurer and would have picked anyone who fit the bill. Loki continued, declaring he wouldn't hire someone useless again and would find a proper mage. As one of only 3 A-rank parties, they had no shortage of powerful adventurers lining up to join. Knowing he was truly being abandoned this time, Ray desperately clung to Loki, begging for another chance and promising to do better. But Loki just sneered, then coldly stabbed him in the stomach, telling him to heal himself. The rest of the party jeered, enjoying Ray's suffering, as he writhed in agony, struggling to breathe. In despair, he pulled the sword from his stomach, causing blood to gush out. In a desperate state, he struggled to heal his own wounds. Loki was impressed by Ray's recovery speed as the wound closed without a scar. The only thing Loki valued in Ray was his rapid healing ability. Even though he was exhausted, Ray forced himself to stand up, hoping to prove he would no longer be a burden. Panting but still standing, he asked Loki if his efforts were enough. But the leader responded with a punch to the gut, knocking him to the ground. Deciding the teleportation stone was too precious to waste on him, Loki tossed back the sword he had once been given, saying he would need it to survive. With that cold farewell, the group teleported away, leaving Ray alone and in despair. He wondered about his cruel fate, having endured everything to keep his place, only to be ruthlessly abandoned. Just then, a giant turtle monster appeared, but Ray was still unable to move. As the giant turtle flung him across a chasm, he fell freely, his heart filled with bitterness. His life had been nothing but a series of misfortunes. His family slaughtered by monsters, he became an orphaned slave, bought by Loki, and always the target of everyone's frustrations. Struggling with the meaning of his life, Ray was thrown across a deep chasm by the giant turtle. As he plunged downwards, filled with sorrow, he suddenly crashed into a body of water. In the darkness, he heard a familiar voice, telling him to answer. The darkness slowly brightened, as Ray opened his eyes to see a little girl looking down at him with an annoyed expression. Confused by the presence of a child in the dungeon, Ray could only stare at her. She joked about him being charmed by her cuteness, and was surprised when Ray honestly admitted it. Once he collected himself, Ray worriedly asked why she was here and what floor they were on. The little girl couldn't explain her own reasons, but stunned Ray by revealing they were on the 200th floor, the deepest level of the Yggdrasil labyrinth. Hearing this, Ray despaired, thinking there was no chance of escape. But the little girl said he should be able to get out because he had obtained the dungeon's secret treasure. Confused, Ray asked her to explain. She asked if he could feel the aura of Yggdrasil, as the dungeon's curse had taken hold of him. Ray's rotted left eye was proof of this, but he still didn't grasp the deeper meaning of her words. His magic circuits were now connected to the dungeon itself, granting him an infinite source of magical power. How he used that power was entirely up to him, and with it, he could escape safely. Seeing Ray's confusion at the talk of Yggdrasil's curse and infinite power, the strange little girl introduced herself as Norn. The name sounded familiar, but Ray still didn't understand. Norn told him to try using the healing spell, Heal, but Ray hesitated, explaining that casting it would drain all his mana, leaving him exhausted and unable to move. Noticing him trembling, Norn gently patted his head and encouraged him to try. Ray did as she said, and was shocked to find he was completely fine, even feeling full of life. His magic wasn't depleted, on the contrary. His body was overflowing with magical power. Norn explained that it was thanks to the power of Yggdrasil, reminding him that his magic circuit was connected to this dungeon. Normally, magic flows from the core of the magic circuit, and it's hard to recover it quickly. However, when you were swept away, you received Yggdrasil's curse, causing your magic core to transfer from your left eye to Yggdrasil itself. Thanks to that, you can use unlimited magic, Norn nodded proudly, as Ray asked how such a big change could happen, especially since she kept calling it a curse. She led Ray along and explained that it had to do with the stream he had fallen into. Before she could pull him out, Ray had drunk from the stream, which was the tears of the world tree, said to have the power to restore life force. She pointed to the tree he was leaning against and explained that this was the world tree, the very core that formed this dungeon. Ray looked at the tree in awe, finally putting all the pieces together. The deepest floor of this SSS rank dungeon, along with the secret treasure that every top adventurer coveted, was the very stream born from the World Tree. Ray had been lucky enough to obtain that treasure completely by chance. Hearing him say that, Norn cheerfully revealed that her garden had an SSS rank dungeon, then suddenly remembered she had never explained why she was there. Ray asked if she lived alone and was surprised to learn that with no one else in the dungeon, Norn had survived all by herself. The little girl proudly asserted her strength. But Ray was skeptical, since dungeons usually have age restrictions. She said she could easily defeat S-rank monsters, but Ray wasn't entirely convinced, recalling how his own party had been completely helpless against them. Norn noticed the doubtful look in Ray's eyes, so she changed the subject back to his escape. Ray wanted to leave, but the upper floors were teeming with monsters, and even with unlimited magic, he still lacked the combat skills to face them. On top of that, even if he did manage to escape, he had no idea where he would go. Since he had been abandoned by his party, he had nowhere left to return to. Feeling empty inside, Ray considered staying in the dungeon for the rest of his life, wondering if that would be the happiest life he could possibly have. Finally, after making his decision, Ray hesitantly and timidly asked Norn if he could live here with her. At first, the question didn't register with Norn, but when it did, she was surprised and waved her hands frantically, confused since just a few minutes ago he had been insisting on leaving the dungeon. Meanwhile, Ray picked up his sword, apologizing for changing his mind, and asked her how she managed to eat and drink while living here. Accepting his apology, Norn explained that thanks to Yggdrasil's magic, there was no need to eat or drink. The body would still be supplied with nutrients and recover quickly, making him nearly immortal. Seeing his surprise, Norn emphasized that it was only nearly, and that he could still die from a fatal wound. Whether he stayed or left, Ray still needed to get stronger because monsters constantly appeared in the dungeon. He promised to do his best, and Norn told him to follow her, promising to teach him the basics. Determined not to be a burden anymore, he followed Norn closely, beginning a new journey. 3 years later, Ray had completely changed. He had become a confident and much stronger person. When faced with a giant snake, he calmly waited for the right moment, severing its tail in a single slash. In pain, the snake tried to crawl away, but Ray leaped up, plunging his sword into its head, and activated his magical power, destroying the monster from the inside. The giant snake collapsed, and Ray looked at his hands with satisfaction. He called out Norn's name, joyfully announcing his victory. Seeing that he had defeated the Lord of the 181st floor by himself, Norn praised him, saying he had changed completely and now had better control over his magic. Ray had just poured his magical energy directly into the enemy's body, a testament to his 3 years of hard training. Ray didn't want to remember the time when he was still weak, facing constant death from even the smallest monsters. However, it was still an S-rank monster rabbit, and if it weren't for the regenerative power of Yggdrasil, he wouldn't have survived to train. Thanks to this power source, Ray could use unlimited healing magic and accumulate endless combat experience. He even restored his left eye. His achievements far exceeded Norn's expectations. She thought it would take him 100 years to achieve what he'd accomplished in 3, so much so that she called him the real monster. But Ray humbly said it was thanks to her guidance. As they headed back, Norn told him not to be so modest, when suddenly Roy heard another voice scornfully telling him he was still weak. He looked around but saw no one, and was surprised that even Norn knew about it. She said he was hallucinating an image of his younger self. She explained it might be a side effect of his connection to Yggdrasil, and that his power might even be influenced by fragments of memories from the dead. Norn and Ray began a training match, and she hit him quite hard, noticing a hint of longing for the outside world in his eyes. Ray quickly reassured her that wasn't the case. It was just that time had passed so quickly. At first, it felt like it had stopped, as he struggled to survive the harsh training every day. But then, everything just flew by, and he felt like he had grown strong enough to live in this place. During their spar, Ray instinctively glanced away when Norn's skirt fluttered in the wind. She immediately punished him for getting distracted mid-fight, saying that even though he had grown up, he was still the same naive boy she'd met 3 years ago. They enjoyed the clear night sky together, where Ray, despite being much stronger, still kept his mix of innocence and clumsiness. Ray watched Norn for a long time, then suddenly asked if she had been living alone for so long, certain she had never met anyone else. Besides monsters like the Shadow Viper, even though he himself had nearly died many times fighting it, a fate not uncommon in the dungeon. He wondered if she ever wanted to leave this place, and was surprised to learn that she couldn't. If she could, she would have left this place long ago. Norn revealed that besides her power, she had her own reasons for staying in this dungeon, and her silence implicitly advised him not to ask any further. Still, she confessed that she had a few dreams she wanted to fulfill out there. Then, looking at Ray, she asked if he wanted to return to the outside world, perhaps to resolve any unfinished business. Thinking about that question, an image of his old adventurer party surfaced in his mind. Ray didn't want to reunite with them. Instead, a feeling of hatred welled up inside him. As the darkness in his heart became apparent, Norn asked further if there was anyone he wanted to see again outside the dungeon. Hearing that, the image of a woman appeared in his mind, causing him to snap to his senses and stand up, as if he had just realized something important. After some thought, Ray remembered that he still had something he needed to do. He told Norn that he would return to the outside world, because before he was captured as a slave and then joined the adventurer party, he had a friend named Nenemoa. Nenemoa, a girl around the same age as Ray, was always the one who stood up to protect him and the others from the abuse of the slave masters. Like a big sister, she always ensured everyone's safety, and when Ray asked if she was okay, Nenemoa would always reply that she would protect them, and hoped they would rescue her too if she was ever in danger, even though he knew full well that he didn't have the ability to keep that promise. Nenemoa was always kind, which touched his heart even more. Back then, when he was a slave, or when he became an adventurer, Ray could never fulfill that promise. But now, with the strength he possessed, he believed that if he met Nenemoa and saw her in danger, he would be strong enough to protect her. Months passed, and Ray and Norn made their way through the dungeon step by step, facing countless challenges to find a way out. Determined to reunite with Nenemoa, Ray realized he had entered a familiar area, and Norn said they might be on the 125th floor. Even though they had only made it halfway, he was already exhausted both physically and mentally from the arduous journey. Norn reminded him that it would take at least 2 years to finish. For all these months, they had been aiming for the exit, and Ray was the one who shouldered most of the battles. Norn insisted it was part of his training, and she usually just sat back and watched him struggle, only intervening when absolutely necessary. Giggling, Norn refused to help him, stressing that if she helped, it wouldn't be training anymore. She teased that all she could do now was laugh, seeing how strong he'd become. Recalling the time he was flustered while washing his clothes covered in monster saliva, Ray tried to say something important, but Norn was distracted when she spotted a bag nearby and rushed over to check if there were any spare clothes. He was surprised to see her so eager, but immediately recognized the bag as the one he used to carry for his old party. Looking around, Ray gradually remembered why this place looked so familiar. This was the place where he had fallen the night he was abandoned. Rummaging through the bag, Norn only found useless odds and ends, crying out in disappointment that there was nothing useful. Ray didn't know what to say and just sighed. But just then, a hulking beast stomped into the area. Ray came face to face with the familiar giant turtle. The very same monster that had thrown him into the abyss the last time. Determined to prove how much he'd changed, he lunged forward and struck the turtle on its back, but the blow barely left a scratch on its thick shell. While the viper from before had been more annoying, this turtle was far more resilient. Realizing its shell was the toughest part, Ray quickly grabbed one of its legs and flipped the massive monster onto its back, leaving it immobilized. The turtle lay helpless under Ray's control, his eyes cold as his blade hovered, ready to strike. With one swift strike, the monster's head rolled onto the ground. After the battle, Ray turned to Norn, asking what she thought of his performance, but she simply told him gently that he should try to make friends once he was outside. Norn couldn't explain it well, but she was worried he was still too reckless and believed that having trustworthy friends would help him. While he agreed, Ray admitted he had no idea how to make friends. Norn, with a bright expression, encouraged him to try, reminding him that people can't be alone forever. She said he had his whole life ahead of him, and that he needed to find people to share it with, even if she couldn't always be by his side. Ray asked Norn to stop saying such ominous things, but she just looked at him with a carefree expression. Accepting defeat, he clenched his fist and promised he would do as she asked. Norn happily praised him as if he were still a child, because in her eyes, that's exactly what he was. With a bright smile, Norn led him onward, and Ray promised himself that one day he would return to Yggdrasil to introduce Norn to his new friends. Their journey continued across many paths, encountering many interesting things, and filled with cheerful moments. At last they reached the exit, the brilliant light from outside forcing them to squint. Even with her nigh-immortal body, Norn reminded Ray to be careful, telling him her duty was now fulfilled. Ray cautiously asked if she really couldn't go with him, but he already knew that her body was formed from the dungeon's aura, and that her true physical form had vanished long ago. If she were to step outside, Norn would disappear in an instant. With no other choice, the two had to accept their farewell. He apologized for making her say something so painful, while Norn tried to lighten the mood by putting on a cheerful act. Suddenly, however, she grew shy, quietly asking if he would visit from time to time, saying she'd be lonely without him. Ray was touched and reassured her that he would definitely come back, even bringing a few friends along so she'd have more companions. While his main goal was to find Nenemoa, he also told himself to enjoy the journey. With warm smiles, they said their goodbyes, marking the end of the 3 years he had spent in the deepest levels, and the 2 years he spent climbing back to the surface, bringing his 5 long years in the dungeon to a close. Stepping outside, a mix of thrill and excitement washed over him as he saw the brilliant sky and felt the cool breeze. Watching the dungeon entrance slowly seal shut, Ray silently thanked Norn and reminded himself of his purpose, determined to earn money and start a new life. He suddenly caught a familiar scent. His eyes darted around. He realized the smell was coming from somewhere in the forest. The scent of blood and monsters. There, a soldier trembled, watching in horror as his comrade was sliced in half by an intelligent, weapon-wielding monster. Turns out its leader had ordered the monsters to devour as many humans as possible. One of the 4 deadly demon generals had ordered an assault on the capital to annihilate all of humanity. The monster armies under their command were preparing to invade the capital, launching one assault after another. They relentlessly attacked humans, plundering and slaughtering, but it was never enough. Despite inflicting heavy losses, they still didn't have the resources to bring down the capital and prove their superior strength to the waiting demon general. During their most recent attack, a transport carriage had been completely destroyed. The soldiers under attack recognized their enemy as Vegan, a notorious B-rank human hunter. Pleased with the high-quality goods plundered from the Drake slave company, he smashed open the carriage door and discovered a bound woman trembling in fear. Although there were only 3 people in the party, 2 of them holy knights, Vegan wasn't surprised. He was used to these constant attacks. One of the holy knights, realizing Vegan's terrifying strength, immediately fled to warn the kingdom, leaving the enslaved woman behind. Annoyed, Vegan let out a contemptuous sneer, wondering how an elite warrior could turn his back on an enemy. With a single swing, Vegan's axe tore the holy knight in 2. He was bored and disappointed by his weak opponent. He walked towards the bound woman, asking if she agreed with him. As he let his beast feast on the man's corpse, he looked at her with an interested gaze, deciding to make her his pet. The panicked woman begged for help, but her fear only excited Vegan more. He grabbed her face, amused that she was just like all the others, willing to do anything to survive. What he loved most was the moment his prey was betrayed, and plunged into despair. He planned to take care of her until her pleas for life turned into a yearning for death. Just then, Ray walked in, coolly greeting them both, startling both Vegan and the woman. In a calm voice, Ray apologized for the ruined scene, then said he was lost and wanted to ask the woman for directions to the nearest village. Vegan immediately refused to help and took note of Ray's appearance, tattered clothes and a body covered in monster blood. The woman frantically warned Ray not to come any closer and told him to run, letting him know that she was Vegan's target. Thanks to her words, Ray quickly grasped the situation. Vegan noticed Ray's suspicion, but he knew he couldn't leave any witnesses. Vegan came up with a cruel idea. He would let Ray run, then slash his legs off from behind, forcing the woman to watch before finishing him off. The thought of her horrified expression only made Vegan more excited. Offering Ray a chance to run, he set one condition: the woman had to stay behind. Expecting Ray to be torn between saving his own life and helping her, Vegan was surprised when he turned to leave without any hesitation. Just then, he swung his axe, severing the boy's legs as planned, causing Ray to collapse into the bushes like a puppet with its strings cut. The woman screamed in horror at the brutality she had just witnessed, and Vegan savored her terrified expression. Vegan approached Ray's body, intending to gaze upon the boy's face twisted in pain, but just then his vision suddenly flipped upside down, and his head hit the ground, cleanly severed from his neck. It took him a moment to process what had just happened, only to find that his head was somehow back on his neck. Ray stood there, calmly confirming that he hadn't felt any pain, because the cut was incredibly clean. Looking back at Ray, the demon was astonished to see that Ray's legs were completely intact, even though he had just chopped them off seconds ago. He bewilderedly asked what had just happened, and Ray calmly replied that his head had been cut off and then restored with a healing spell. Having never heard of such a powerful recovery spell, Vegan thought it might be an illusion. Though he didn't fully understand, one thing was clear: the person before him would kill him if he didn't run. His instinct screamed at him to flee, but his legs felt frozen to the spot. His master's voice echoed in his head, reminding him that his mission was to devour all humans. Realizing he would be executed by the 4 great demons if he returned, Vegan decided to bet his life and attack Ray. Confident in his title as the Manhunter, the one who had decimated 3 villages and killed numerous holy knights. However, just as he swung his axe, his arm was suddenly sliced off. Under Ray's terrifying gaze, Vegan finally understood the gap in their power. Terrified, he fled, and Ray let him go, coldly warning him that there wouldn't be a second chance. If they met again, there would be only one outcome: death. Vegan had always seen himself as a strong man, but now he could only cry in fear, realizing he had become the prey. Meanwhile, Ray approached the woman to check on her, and she introduced herself as Liana, a slave thanking him for saving her. Suddenly, Liana checked Ray's legs, still finding it hard to believe they had fully recovered. Touched by her concern, he reassured her that he had used healing magic. This stunned her, as she had never heard of a healing spell that could instantly regenerate severed limbs. After 5 years of using his healing magic that way, Ray hadn't realized his powers might have surpassed the norm. Ray asked her what she planned to do next, but Liana wasn't sure either. Looking at her, Ray saw a reflection of his past self, someone who had also experienced the feeling of being helpless and lost, unwilling to leave a young girl with nowhere to go. Ray thought of Nenemoa, his old friend who would surely help a girl in her situation. With that in mind, Ray decided to head to the capital, and held out his hand, inviting Liana to come with him. With his current strength, Ray wanted to become someone like his friend had been, always ready to help others, even knowing it might delay their reunion. Meanwhile, in a dark room, a woman was led inside, facing a sinister woman crawling on the floor, disappointed by the recent failure of her experiment. The evil woman moved on to test her next subject, who happened to be none other than Nenemoa. Back with Ray, he stuck the swords of the fallen knights into the ground, carefully giving them a final send-off before preparing to leave, hoping to get far before nightfall. Though he felt guilty taking clothes from the carriage, he decided to leave a precious gem from the dungeon as compensation. Liana talked to Ray about his offer, and regretfully declined, afraid that Vegan might reappear if she went with him. Even though the demon had been spared and was so terrified he wouldn't dare attack anyone for a while, she still didn't want to put Ray in danger. Ray reassured Liana, telling her not to worry about him and that she should live a normal life, free from slavery. However, it wasn't that easy. Although her master was dead, the slave seal remained on her hand, a cage that imprisoned her freedom forever. The seal acted as a binding command, preventing those who bore it from disobeying their master's orders. Ray realized his mistake in thinking she could just be free, and that the fate of masterless slaves often led to a tragic end. When they first met, she had pleaded with him to run, prioritizing his life over her own. She seemed afraid that if she agreed to go with him, she would drag him into unnecessary trouble. Remembering Nenemoa, who he was certain would protect others with all her strength, Ray decided to help Liana in the best way he knew how. He politely held out his hand, and asked if she would like to form a contract with him. Liana's eyes widened in surprise, and she worried that if anyone found out, he would be the one to get in trouble. Ignoring any formal procedure, Ray held out his hand, revealing the slave crest that he used to hide with medicine. He told her that he too had once been a slave, abandoned and cast out. Suddenly, Ray sensed danger approaching, and swiftly swung his sword, cleaving a dark wolf demon in two. As the beast collapsed, he realized it was a wolf demon from Vegan's pack. An entire pack of wolves descended upon them. Ray told Liana to get behind him. The wolves charged forward, but Ray channeled magic into his legs, causing the ground to erupt into a wall, killing several of the beasts and creating a barrier to shield the girl from the pack. He quickly took them down one by one, and Liana could only watch in awe, realizing he was no ordinary healing magician. Meanwhile, Ray came up with the idea of striking fear into the pack, just as he had done with Vegan. Just then, an unexpected battle cry rang out. Ray was stunned to see Liana, gripping a sword tightly in her hand. As she struck down another one of the demons, she declared that she would fight alongside him. Ray, a bit flustered, tried to stop her, but Liana explained that she'd been trained to use weapons, though this was her first time actually using one in a real fight. Ray was surprised when Liana told him that slaves weren't just for domestic chores, but were also trained for combat. He figured it was a sign of the changing times, but he still rushed to protect her. Knowing the sheer number of monsters was too much for a novice, deciding to end the fight, Ray unleashed the full extent of his power, causing the demon pack to flee in terror. Once everything had settled down, Ray gently let go of Liana, assuring her that it was now safe. She thanked him again for saving her, and her expression revealed that she had intentionally fought recklessly, seeing herself as a burden and wanting to find a reason to accompany Ray. To reassure her, Ray lied, saying that he had lost his memories of the past few years, and asked her to teach him about what had happened during that time. Intent on finding Nenemoa, he needed to understand the outside world after his time underground. Ray gently asked Liana to share her knowledge, offering her protection and financial support as compensation. Seeing her hesitate, he emphasized that he simply needed her, nothing more and nothing less. Liana hesitated for a moment. But remembering how Ray had saved her life, she agreed to the deal. The two of them thanked each other and officially sealed the contract. Although she was now officially Ray's slave, Liana asked him for her first command, but Ray immediately refused. He explained that he didn't want to be her master and that the contract only offered two benefits. They would always know each other's location and could share magic. This would make it easier for Ray to protect her. After shaking hands to formalize their relationship, they decided to keep things casual and friendly. After their introductions, Ray suggested they set up camp and rest for the night. Liana was initially worried about the dangers of stopping, but Ray reassured her, admitting that he was tired too. He praised her fighting skills and survival knowledge. As they considered their current location, Ray was surprised to realize they were south of the capital city, Ro, in Serval territory. Back when he was with his party, he and his comrades had entered the dungeon from the north. This meant that Yggdrasil was a massive labyrinth, stretching all the way from the north to the south. While Ray was lost in thought, Liana suddenly commented on his strength, sharing that during her training, she had once witnessed a training session of high-ranking holy knights in the royal capital. She recalled that the holy knights were indeed very powerful, but compared to Ray, they were much weaker and couldn't keep up with his speed. Her words took Ray by surprise, especially when Liana said he was truly amazing. Realizing what she had said, Liana blushed in embarrassment. Just then, a terrifying sound echoed from behind them, deep within the forest. Both of them immediately became alert, especially Ray, as he predicted that this might be a monster even stronger than the last one. He told Liana to get behind him and moved toward the sound, preparing to face the new threat. Meanwhile, Loki and his party had finally arrived at the A-rank dungeon, Death's Dream Gate. The whole team declared they were ready for the mission, feeling stronger than ever. Thanks to our new healer, Kanata. With confidence, Loki declared the start of their conquest. Inside Valon Castle in the royal capital, Loki walked through the halls, recalling the last time he was here 5 years ago, when his team was promoted to A rank. This castle is a crucial place for the royal family, with only a select few allowed inside, including those receiving orders from the king and those being honored. Upon entering the throne room, Loki witnessed the king command the hero to reclaim the land from the demons and defeat the demon king. After sending the hero off on his mission, the king summoned Loki and rewarded him for conquering A-rank dungeons with his team, promoting them to S-rank. In the room, other parties were waiting, and Loki felt a thrill as he noticed their envious gazes fixed on him. His team was the only one promoted to S-rank. Loki respectfully expressed his gratitude to the king, pledging to become one of his loyal servants. After being dismissed, he reflected on the dungeons and missions he and his team had overcome to reach their current status. It had been a long but worthwhile journey, as they not only received a huge reward from the Adventurers Guild, but also a stipend from the kingdom. As Loki stepped outside, a knight recognized him and praised him for becoming an S-rank adventurer at only 20 years old. This only boosted Loki's confidence, as many others were still struggling with A-rank dungeons. Loki was in a state of euphoria, receiving recognition and praise from everyone, satisfying his desire to prove himself a great warrior. Feigning humility, Loki said his group's success was also thanks to the efforts of its members. The knight suggested that with their new S-rank status, Loki's team could join the hero's party to defeat the Demon King, or take down the undead menace themselves and help cleanse the country of monsters. With a broad smile, Loki promised to help defeat the enemy and took his leave to return to his members waiting at the gate. As the knight walked away, Loki sneered to himself, thinking the man was too naive to believe a single party could destroy the undead menace. This monster could transform into 3 forms: humanoid, beast, and liquid. Even at S rank, Loki found it impossible to imagine defeating a terrifying foe like the undead menace, an enemy that not even the hero and his party could destroy. Fortunately, the undead menace only appeared in SSS rank dungeons like Yggdrasil, and Loki was relieved that his team would never have to face such a powerful enemy. The next day, Loki's team successfully conquered a dragon monster in the A-rank dungeon, the Gates of Death. Loki acted as bait while Himeno and Suglenst launched a powerful assault, causing the dragon to fall thanks to their combined strength. However, just as Suglenst turned his back, the monster, still having some fight left in it, attacked again. Luckily, File managed to block it in time, paralyzing the dragon. Loki quickly trapped the monster in his magic barrier, finishing it off for good. After the battle, Loki scolded Suglins for not crushing the monster's head, nearly getting himself killed. Meanwhile, Kanata was still healing the warrior's injured arm, but Suglins was growing impatient. However, Kanata insisted that she needed more time. Loki remained silent, ignoring Suglins' annoyance and instead scanning his surroundings. His gaze landing on the Gate of Death. Loki recalled the news that spread 3 years ago about a group of miners who had accidentally unearthed the entrance to this dungeon while searching for treasure, but none of them ever returned. His party's mission was to investigate the incident and conquer the dungeon. Just then, he noticed Fail anxiously looking at a strange plant. Fail, in his role as the Dark Mage, explained that it was a snowdrop, which usually grows in snow-covered areas, but could also bloom in places with a strong source of magical power. Hearing this, Loki began to think that there must be an extremely powerful monster lurking in the dungeon. Suddenly, Himeno spoke up, saying her blessed sword was reacting strongly, as if warning her to run. Hearing that, Loki started to feel threatened as Himeno emphasized that the sword's blessing enhanced her 5 senses and allowed her to sense a hidden enemy nearby. However, Loki insisted the group press on, assuring his teammates they had enough experience conquering various dungeons. He also pointed out that the party's strength had improved thanks to Kanata's healing abilities. Kanata humbly denied it, saying her abilities couldn't compare to the first-rate healer, Rei. Loki was surprised and wanted to confirm if it was the same Rei, his former party member, that she was talking about. Kanata nodded, admiring Rei's talent for using his power to maintain balance within the group. Suddenly, Suglens burst out laughing, unable to believe that Rei could be considered the best among healers. He scoffed that Rei only had a bit of weak magic and couldn't even heal properly. Kanata retorted, explaining that Rei always found ways to protect his comrades without relying on magic, spending most of his time researching and reading, and called him the greatest white mage. Hearing such high praise, Loki couldn't hide his contempt, especially when she revealed that Rei was the fastest when it came to recovery, so much so that he could reattach completely severed limbs, an ability far beyond advanced healing. She further explained that healers could normally only accelerate recovery, but Rei could achieve complete regeneration. Loki began to understand that without Rei, their party would have struggled to reach A rank, let alone S rank. The entire party fell silent, realizing that Rei was truly an extraordinary figure. They also recalled the other healers who had replaced Rei, but none could ever match his speed and precision, leaving them all astonished and forced to acknowledge his unparalleled talent in recovery magic. While the party members were trying to digest this new information, Himeno suddenly warned everyone to take cover. Loki also sensed the presence of a powerful creature approaching. Himeno carefully readied her weapon, judging that with this level of power it was most likely the dungeon boss. The whole team was surprised, wondering why a boss-level monster would be on such a low floor. Himeno warned that this could be an S-rank monster, leaving Loki stunned because that meant they could be facing an enemy on par with the monsters in Yggdrasil. Loki tried to stay calm, telling himself that 5 years had passed since they explored Yggdrasil, and they were now an S-rank party themselves. With renewed determination, he reminded the team that they had grown much stronger over the years, and now they were more than capable of facing this monster. Their spirits lifted by Loki's encouragement, the members began to prepare for battle. However, when the monster revealed itself, they all froze in terror. What stood before them wasn't just any ordinary monster, but the legendary living dead horror, which observed them one by one with a chilling grin. Loki found himself overwhelmed with fear, realizing this was the legendary monster that not even a hero could defeat without their entire party. Observing closely as the monster approached, Loki saw a slight advantage in the fact that his opponent had a humanoid form. Determined to survive, the party launched an immediate attack, aiming to become the first adventurers ever to defeat a living dead horror and prove themselves as strong as the hero's party. Meanwhile, Rei was walking through the dark forest, having detected the presence of a monster inside and followed its trail. Eventually, he found a liquid-type living dead horror, the most troublesome of the 3 forms. Standing outside the Yggdrasil labyrinth, File couldn't help but think of Rei, who had always treated her with such kindness. On her birthday, he had given her a butterfly-shaped hair clip, as a thank you gift for always saving him on the battlefield and helping with his daily chores. File had accepted the gift gratefully, promising to cherish it forever. Yet, despite her gratitude, File was filled with regret for not being able to stand up for Rei within the party. She knew that Rei was the true driving force behind the team's success, but the other members were blind to it, seeing him only as a weakling. In reality, Ray was the one who worked the hardest in the party. Loki had told File it was only natural for Ray to struggle the most, since he was just a weak, light mage, capable of only a simple healing spell. He insisted that Ray needed to make up for his lack of strength and abilities, especially as a member of an A-rank party. From that moment on, File realized her words carried no weight with the group, and she stopped trying to convince them that Ray was truly a valuable member. During another visit to Yggdrasil, File encountered Norn, who recognized her from her frequent visits to the area. They both demanded to know each other's identities, but File tried to ignore the girl and walk past. Feeling challenged, Norn told Fale she was being quite rude, and warned that with her current strength, she would die if she entered the Yggdrasil labyrinth. To get away from Norn, File tried to fly up, but when Norn sensed her magic, she exclaimed that File looked very familiar. Finally, Norn realized that File had been coming to the labyrinth so often. To look for Ray, when asked if she was Ray's friend, File just gave a sad smile, doubting Ray would even consider her a friend anymore. After betraying him, Fale was haunted by guilt. However, Norn pointed out that she must be Ray's friend, since she was willing to enter the labyrinth alone, even facing death, just to find him. Hearing this, File fell into despair, realizing that even if she wanted to, she couldn't bring her best friend back. Norn immediately cleared up the misunderstanding and said that Ray was still alive, but that he wanted to live inside the labyrinth, for now. Hearing that Ray was still alive, File couldn't hold back her tears, releasing all the pent-up worry and fear she had been carrying for her friend. Norn was glad to see that someone considered Ray a friend and that he still had a place to return to. After composing herself, File handed Ray's belongings to Norn and asked her to secretly place them near the waterfall on the 125th floor. Norn encouraged File to leave a message for Ray, but she refused, thinking she wasn't worthy of reconnecting with him. Before leaving, Norn gave File a soul stone, saying she could sell it for a large sum of money, and instructed her that if Ray ever decided to return to the outside world, she should take care of him. With determination, File agreed and thanked Norn, whom she realized was a wandering spirit. File promised to never return to the labyrinth and put herself in danger again. She felt a sense of salvation knowing that Ray was still alive, but the truth was that she had abandoned him, and she would have to carry that burden forever. Currently, the Gunkino party is fighting a horrifying enemy, the Undead Terror. They are clearly losing the battle, their bodies covered in injuries. File did her best to use her magic, and waited for an opportunity to land a decisive blow. However, the Undead Terror suddenly attacked, unleashing a burst of power aimed at Feel, sending her flying, seemingly lifeless. Suglins was horrified to see his comrade taken down in the blink of an eye, and tried to fight the Undead Terror head-on. However, the Undead Warrior easily defeated him, leaving his lifeless body on the ground. Remarking how weak and fragile adventurers were, meanwhile Kanata and Loki stood frozen, terrified by the Undead Terror's cold gaze as she declared she would end their lives. Just then, Himeno launched a surprise attack from behind, but the monster used its tentacles, piercing through her chest without even moving. Loki trembled as he watched his party members fall one by one. As the Undead Terror continued its assault, Kanata tried to snap Loki back to reality. However, the protective shield he created was quickly shattered by the enemy, and in an instant, both his arms and legs were severed. Kanata screamed in terror, and Loki begged her to heal him immediately. But it was too late. The Undead Terror was already standing right in front of Loki, its menacing gaze looming over him. In a panic, Loki begged her to spare his life, repeatedly apologizing for daring to trespass on her territory. Loki even offered to let the monster eat his entire party if it spared him. The monster coldly replied that his whining hurt its ears, and prepared to strike him with its tentacles. In a desperate move, Loki grabbed Kanata to use as a shield. Fortunately, File regained consciousness and managed to block the attack with her Gigafang technique, while shouting for Kanata to quickly heal the others, while she held off the Undead Terror. Witnessing File's courage, the monster sneered, amused by the foolishness of the weak mage before it. Meanwhile, Fale braced herself, determined to at least save Kanata. As the monster closed in, plunging its tentacles deep into her body, File felt that this was her punishment for betraying a good friend. She only hoped that Ray would be happy to see them suffer this pain, as penance for her betrayal. File confessed to herself that she was afraid of being abandoned, because people despised mages with demon blood like her, so she had stayed silent, letting others bully Ray just to save herself. In her final thoughts before accepting death, she prayed that one day Ray would forgive her. Loki woke up in a completely white room, vaguely recalling the battle with the immortal demon, and realizing he had lost his right arm and left leg in that fight. Just then, the head of the clinic walked in to check on his condition. Upon learning she was a top-tier healer, Loki offered to pay a large sum for her to heal his lost body parts. However, the woman bluntly replied that she didn't have that ability but knew someone who once did. However, that person was dead, and it was Loki himself who had caused their death. Loki denied the accusation and arrogantly boasted that he was the leader of a royally recognized adventuring party. Despite this, the head of the clinic didn't believe him, pointing out that over the past 5 years, 5 healers had joined his party, and all of them ended up dead. She added that she had read Kanada's report, which detailed how Loki used her as a human shield against the immortal demon. Now that the truth was exposed, the head of the clinic vowed that Loki would not escape punishment. She added that his life as an adventurer was over, as his party members had all been incapacitated. Suglensd was in a coma. Himeno was blind and had lost her left arm and leg, and File was missing and presumed dead. The Gunkano party, his pride and joy, was now disbanded. Meanwhile, Ray was fighting the immortal demon, slashing at it again and again, but the monster kept regenerating, proving it had consumed many people and monsters before. As the monster attacked, Ray quickly countered with another slash. But he wondered why such a powerful monster would appear in the forest, since they usually only live around the Demon King's castle. He recalled how the monster had deliberately released a large amount of power, as if trying to lure him to its location. From this, Ray deduced that someone, possibly a high-ranking demon, was controlling the monster and wanted to test his true abilities. If this speculation was correct, that person must be watching him closely. He carefully scanned his surroundings and decided to end the fight quickly. With Liana still waiting, Ray didn't want to reveal too much of his abilities, but he was determined to fight seriously to ensure Liana's safety. He rushed towards the monster, slashing at it repeatedly, tearing its body to shreds. Finally, he discovered the core, the monster's weak point, and used his aura to destroy it in a single blow. Ray's sword strike swiftly finished off the immortal demon, causing it to explode and turn to dust. After the battle, Ray collected the monster's core and considered using it to craft a powerful weapon or selling it for a high price. Hiding behind the bushes, Liana was stunned and amazed to see Ray defeat the monster with just a single precise blow. She was surprised by his masterful ability to dodge the monster's tentacles and how quickly he identified its weak point. Ray tried to downplay what he had just done, but he remembered his past battles with immortal demons on the middle floors of Yggdrasil, which gave him the experience to fight them outside the labyrinth. He then turned to Liana and told her they should find a place to rest for the night. As they left the forest, Ray tried to sense any presences around them, but couldn't find any. He asked Liana if she wanted to get something sweet when they reached the capital. He decided to sell the monster cores and take her to a sweet shop he knew. Shy and hesitant at first, she eventually agreed to go with him, which made Ray smile as he eagerly looked forward to enjoying a treat with her. As the sun set, they found a spot to rest for the night. However, Liana informed him that she had spotted a village. They both went to check, and Ray confirmed it was indeed the entrance to a village. Liana let out a sigh of relief after the long hours of exhausting travel, but her knees gave out. She assured him she was fine, and Ray helped her to her feet. She was overjoyed to see the village protected by a sturdy fortress, built from stones imbued with divine power to protect its people. In the past, there had been many casualties from monster attacks, which led to the construction of strong defenses around villages and towns to ensure their safety. They tried to find the entrance gate, but Ray realized that the wall in front of them was the village's only entrance and exit. Liana volunteered to approach the gate and asked the villagers if they could open it for them. Ray stopped her and explained that since the gate was made of the same divine power as the walls, it would reject anyone who possessed magic, like monsters and demons. Ray tried touching the gate, and it burned his hand, proving that even humans with magic would be rejected. Liana apologized for her limited knowledge of divine gates, not knowing that humans with magic were also barred from entry. Ray reassured her that he was fine and considered finding another place to spend the night. Just then, the Eye of the Divine Gate activated, staring intently at them. And then suddenly the gate swung open. Ray told Liana that someone must have granted them entry into the village. As they stepped through the gate, an armored man moved to attack Ray, but suddenly realized they were actually human. He lowered his weapon and immediately apologized for thinking they were monsters disguised as travelers. He introduced himself as the Holy Knight Atra, a diamond rank, and the guardian of the sacred tree in the village of the Divine Gate. Ray was astonished to hear this, as Atra was the sacred tree's guardian at such a young age. Itra was modest, saying he was just lucky, but Ray didn't believe him, since only those exceptional at controlling divine power could activate the Divine Gate, and it was clear Atra was a powerful warrior as well. Atra apologized again and offered to treat them to a meal to make amends, but the village restaurants were already closed. To make up for it, Atra offered to lead them to a good inn for the night and help them get a discount. Ray thanked him and introduced himself and Liana, sharing that Atra had saved them by letting them into the village since they had gotten lost in the forest. Atra was surprised to hear this because the forest was filled with monster corpses, and the fact that they survived was truly astonishing. The Guardian shared that the village had been targeted by a vicious monster for months. This monster is known as the werewolf, and it hunts the people of the village. Atra joked that they were lucky not to have run into the monster in the forest. Otherwise, they surely wouldn't have made it out alive. This werewolf is C rank, and 4 diamond rank holy knights were dispatched to eliminate them, but all of them were killed by 3 werewolves. This situation made the villagers feel unsafe, so they decided to seal the gates. However, the village's supplies have run out, and they can't go outside. The villagers had hoped the capital would send more holy knights, but so far, no aid has arrived. On top of the werewolf attacks, the village is also dealing with mysterious disappearances of its residents. The disappearances started around the same time the werewolves appeared. At first, everyone thought the werewolves were the culprits, but no traces were found, and no screams were heard. Based on that, the village chief concluded the werewolves weren't the cause of the disappearances. However, Atra suspects there's a spy inside the village working with the werewolves. Meanwhile, outside the village gates, 3 werewolves stand guard and confirm with a cloaked man named Alfurk, one of the 4 great demons, that the white-haired man is the one who defeated Vegan. Inside the village, 2 children, Shu and Liz, bring food to Ray and Liana, cheerfully introducing themselves as the innkeeper's kids. They immediately take a liking to our heroes. Atra explains that since he's always on duty at the gate, the 2 children often bring him food. He asks the children to lead Ray and Liana to the inn. Taking Liana's hand, Atra tells Ray that the inn he mentioned is run by his mother, Shinoka, and he highly recommends it because it's affordable and has a large bath. Ray gets excited and tells the knight he's really looking forward to it. When they arrive, the 2 children tell their mother they have guests. Shinoka, the innkeeper, is so excited she's panting as she rushes out to greet them. She happily explains they haven't had guests recently because of the werewolves outside, and that Ray and Liana were lucky to arrive unharmed, as the men who left before were killed instantly. Ray wonders why they didn't encounter any werewolves, even though they were right outside the village, and whether they were intentionally allowed to pass. Wanting to understand the situation better, Ray asks Shinoka for more information on what's been happening in the village. Liana reviews all the information Shinoka provided and reports back to her master that the werewolves began appearing outside Vaughton village 3 months ago. The first victim was a woman who never returned. Only her head turned up in front of the divine gate. After that, the village men gathered to hunt the wolves, but all of them were killed. A few days later, 3 holy knights were dispatched to eliminate them, but they were also wiped out. Around that time, men from the village began to mysteriously disappear, and now a total of 28 people are missing. The biggest mystery is that there are no signs the werewolves have infiltrated the village, which should be nearly impossible since the divine gate protects it. Ray concludes that Atra was right to think there is a spy in the village, possibly a werewolf in disguise or even a demon. Their conversation is interrupted when Shinoka calls them for dinner. Even though the village is short on food, the innkeeper serves up a huge meal without a second thought, saying she's just so grateful because it's been forever since she's had any guests. Just as the 2 of them are about to eat, the 2 children appear, their stomachs rumbling with hunger, and explain they only got 1 piece of bread for dinner because they aren't allowed to eat much. Ray happily offers his own portion to the children, which makes them beam with delight. In return, he asks the 2 of them to share their food equally. Just then, Shinoka was looking for her children, and when she saw them sitting down and eating the guests' food, she offered to deduct it from the guests' room fee. However, Ray told her to charge the full cost as usual. During their conversation, Ray remarked that Atra seemed to be very close with the kids, since they often played and brought food to him. Shinoka explained that Atra once had a family in another town, with 2 children around Liz and Shu's age, but his entire family was killed by demons. Even though he was notified of the danger threatening his hometown, Atra still chose to carry out his mission, protecting the Holy Gate and Vaughton village instead of returning. Ray silently admired the dedication of the Treekeeper god, and realized the burden Atra had been carrying. Later, as Ray was getting ready to take a bath, he realized that there was only 1 bed in the room, and briefly thought about how he had wanted to rent separate rooms for them, but Liana had refused. At that moment, Liana approached with a sad look on her face. Ray asked if something was wrong with the meal, but the girl revealed that she felt guilty for letting him give his portion of food to the children, when she should have been the one to give up her share. Although Ray advised her that he wanted her to eat so she wouldn't get exhausted, Liana couldn't stop feeling bad. Ray gently explained that he doesn't usually get hungry. And furthermore, as a former slave, he understood the feeling of being starved with no one caring if you had enough to eat. He recalled how Nenemoa used to give him her share of food, even though she was also very hungry. Now he felt that he should also become a kind person like her. Liana remarked that her master was truly a kind-hearted person, and she recalled the happy faces of the children, which she would never forget. Ray grew worried as he realized Liana often looked down on herself, was always afraid to express her own thoughts, and tended to praise others without ever feeling confident in herself. He thought to himself that she must have gone through many hardships in her life. As a former slave, those difficult experiences must have left deep scars on Liana's heart, just as they had on his. Ray silently wished she could live a free life, one fitting for a 12-year-old. Unbound by the shackles of her past, he gently patted her head, reminding her that even though they had a contract, he was not her master and she didn't need to be afraid anymore. He hoped that one day Liana would find her own path and live for herself. Afterwards, Ray relaxed in the hot water, thinking that the bathhouse would probably be more crowded if it weren't for the wolves. Suddenly, Liana walked in, covered only by a towel. Leaving Ray stunned, he shot up out of the water. Realizing he was exposing too much, his face flushing red as he quickly apologized. The girl explained that she came in to help wash him, but he insisted that she didn't have to do that because he wasn't her master. The young girl believed that the man had helped her so much, so she wanted to repay his kindness. Liana offered a request. Please let her wash him. Ray understood how she felt, because he'd also once feared being useless to others and had done everything he could for his comrades in the past. He agreed, making Leona flash a bright smile. She was so enthusiastic, wanting to wash him clean from head to toe, which only made Ray even more embarrassed. Liana gently scrubbed his back while Ray relaxed. She asked if he was capable of defeating the wolves. Ray figured that compared to the undead monsters, the wolves were easier to deal with, but it would still be a challenge to face all three of them at once. He knew that wolves were incredibly fast, even faster than the undead monsters, so the hardest part would be preventing them from escaping to call their pack. What puzzled him was why the wolves were in human territory at all, since their kind lived in the demon world. As far as he knew, massive barriers had been erected around the demon world, making it nearly impossible for them to reach the human realm. Liana updated Ray on the situation, telling him that the wolves had reached the human world without having to cross the barriers. She explained that there were two types of demons present in human territory, those born here, and those that came from dungeons, like the wolves. Ray realized she was referring to some kind of dungeon that connected the demon and human worlds. She told him that 3 years ago, an SS rank adventurer party had discovered an entrance to the demon world, but the government never revealed which dungeon it was. Ray concluded that the undead monsters had probably come through that way too, and now there were many dangerous monsters lurking in human territory. He thanked Liana for the useful information. However, Ray suddenly froze when he realized Liana's chest had been pressing against his back, without him even noticing. The girl didn't seem to notice at all and just wanted to continue by washing his front, sending Ray into a complete panic. That evening, the village chief Oki came to the inn to speak with Ray and Liana. He told them about the village's desperate situation. All of its defenders had been killed and they were running out of food. He feared it was only a matter of time before the village was wiped out. He pleaded with them, asking that if they left, they inform a knight in the royal capital about the village's plight. Ray understood and said they were planning on heading to the royal capital anyway. The village chief thanked him sincerely. He also mentioned that Atra had left a message, saying that if Ray wanted to leave, he should do it tonight, as he couldn't sense the wolves' presence nearby. Furthermore, all the people who had vanished had disappeared at night. He thought it would be better if they left before nightfall. He quickly told Liana his decision, and she agreed. When Liz and Shu heard they were about to leave, both children were sad. Ray promised he would come back to visit the village next time, and Liana did as well. Then he turned to ask the village chief a few things. It was time for them to leave, so they both went to Atra's guard post. The guardian of the divine tree apologized, saying that the safest time he could think of for them to leave was the middle of the night, even though it was still dangerous. However, Ray and Liana didn't mind, and asked if it was true that no wolves were nearby. Atra confirmed that he couldn't sense their presence. He guessed they had temporarily left for some unknown reason. He asked them to notify the knights when they reached the capital city of Ro, and Ray agreed. The divine gate opened, allowing them to leave. However, none of them knew that 3 wolves were watching from a distance, relieved that the 2 had left the village. Now they could hunt the villagers freely. They couldn't understand how Vegan had been defeated by someone as ordinary-looking as Ray, but under their leader Alfric's orders not to confront Ray, they decided to leave him alone. The wolves were also wary of the patrolling knights from nearby towns, and knew it was only a matter of time before the knights discovered their territory, especially after they had eaten so many people. The wolves were eager to devour women and children next. So they prepared to storm the village and feast. The women of the village trembled in fear, seeing that the wolf pack had entered and Atra now lay motionless at their mercy. A wolf leaped to attack a mother fleeing with her small child in her arms. But Shinoka rushed in just in time, attacking the beast with a knife. However, the wolf easily seized her and threw her to the ground. Instead of devouring her right away, the beast wanted to hear her scream. So it threatened to eat her children first. Horrified, Shinoka screamed for her children to run, while the wolf opened its jaws to devour her. But just then, a blade plunged deep into the beast's jaw, piercing up through the top of its snout. It was Ray who had returned to face the monsters. The wolf, bleeding from its wound and feeling humiliated, lunged at him with pent-up rage and strength. But Ray deftly dodged with ease, and before the wolf knew what was happening, its left foreleg was severed. Before the wolf could even react, Ray delivered a powerful kick that sent it flying across the room. Ray walked over to where the wolf had landed, only to find that it had already escaped through the window, fleeing for its life. Unable to comprehend how the young man could be so strong, knowing that to continue the fight meant certain death, it decided to return and report to its captain. But after running for a while, it stopped short, seeing its captain collapsed with his left foreleg also severed. From the shadows, Ray emerged, holding the third wolf, which had been beaten to a pulp. Its limbs gone, Ray told the last wolf that he would cut off its remaining legs so it couldn't escape. He bound all three wolves in chains. Suddenly, an image of Ray as a child appeared before him, questioning why he hadn't killed the wolves, when he already knew who the spy in the village was. The child warned that this carelessness would bring him regret in the future. Before Ray could answer, the image vanished. The village chief asked Ray how he knew the wolves were going to attack the village. Ray pointed him to the gatekeeper, Atra, who was pretending to be dead. Atra got up, confirming Ray's suspicion that he had been the spy all along. The villagers broke into murmurs, unable to believe the truth. The one who was suffering the most among them was Shinoka. The village chief spoke up, announcing that Ray had warned him in advance that the guardian of their sacred tree was cooperating with the wolves and would let them into the village through the main gate. Despite not wanting to believe it, the village chief had secretly watched and witnessed Atra opening the gate for the wolves. Atra angrily asked Ray how he had discovered he was a spy. Ray replied that he had a very keen sense of smell, and had smelled the scent of wolves on him from the very beginning. Ray asked why Atra would betray the villagers to work with the wolves. Atra answered that he did it to survive, but Ray could see in his eyes that this was just a lie. Atra continued to make excuses, claiming he had sacrificed the villagers' lives in exchange for his own. Now, he wanted to kill both Ray and everyone in the village, thinking that if he killed Ray, he would level up and have a chance to rule the village he considered a dump. Ray sensed that Atra still wasn't telling the whole truth. So he asked why Atra had joined the Holy Knights when he had to endure a difficult trial to obtain divine power. That meant Atra was once willing to sacrifice his life for someone very important. Finally, Atra admitted that he became a knight to protect his family. Ray said that he understood how Atra felt and that revenge was unnecessary. However, Atra couldn't understand how Ray could sympathize with him, because his family had been taken from him forever. Atra believed it was too late to turn back, because no matter what he said, his family would never return. Now, his only goal was to kill everyone in this country. Ray realized Atra could not be calmed, so he readied his weapon. They both charged at each other, their weapons clashing in a tense battle. While fighting, Atra remembered his wife and his decision to become a holy knight to protect her. Not long after, they were blessed with 2 children, bringing him the greatest happiness of his life. Atra had sworn to protect his family's smiles at any cost. One day, the knight commander ordered Atra to become the guardian of the sacred tree. He disliked the title because it meant being dispatched to Vaughton village. Despite being a holy knight, Atra was sent far away, unable to protect his family or watch his children grow up. After serving for 10 years, Atra realized he would likely be dispatched elsewhere again, and began to doubt the purpose of the power he had obtained. Then one fateful day, he received news that the village where his family lived had been attacked by monsters. A team of 12 holy knights was sent, but all except the captain were new recruits. Sadly, his family did not survive. He couldn't believe it, but eventually had to accept the bitter truth. The truth was even more cruel. His family's village had been used as a training ground for new recruits. He discovered the truth from two surviving knights, who recounted the story without a clue that he was from the village that had been sacrificed. They casually boasted about how smart they were to have run away to save their own lives, even foolishly asking Atra if he agreed with them. Rage swelled within him. He had risked his life countless times to become strong enough, just to protect his family. Listening to their words, his heart shattered. On the day of the punitive expedition, Atra let the two knights die and personally killed the two survivors who had betrayed his village. When the wolves asked why he betrayed his comrades, he could only answer in anguish that they were his enemies. At that moment, the leader of the wolf pack appeared, connecting him to Alfurk, one of the four deadly demons. Sharing a common goal, Alfurk proposed that Atra cooperate with him to destroy this world teeming with corruption. And so they formed an alliance, starting by targeting the village. Using his control over the gate, he let the wolves into the village, killing the villagers in the hope that their numbers would eventually dwindle. And that's how he would free himself from the cursed role of the divine tree's guardian. However, guilt and regret gradually built up inside Atra, but he couldn't stop, because Alfurk's words kept echoing in his mind. Having lost his purpose, Atra couldn't stop thinking about the final end, and wondered what he would have left when all the villagers were dead. In his desperation, he screamed and cried, begging someone to explain his reason for existence. Even though he knew that finding it wouldn't bring his family back, the fight between him and Ray continued to escalate. Liana tried to keep the children from going outside, but they wouldn't listen, and ended up witnessing the two men fighting fiercely in the middle of the village. Ray dodged and countered perfectly, but Atra managed to grab his leg to launch a counterattack. After exchanging powerful blows, both were surprised by their opponent's strength. With his hands trembling from the impact, Atra stared at Ray, unable to believe the young man's powerful magic and high-level martial arts skills. Deep down, he began to hope that this young man might be able to save him from his desperate situation. Despite holding the title of a diamond-rank knight, Atra's true strength was comparable to A-rank warriors thanks to his powerful divine magic, which stemmed from the deep love he had for his lost family. As Ray was pondering this, his thoughts were interrupted by his opponent. Atra provoked him, demanding that he end his life to stop this madness. With a look of determination, Atra raised his spear, uttering an incantation that caused it to burst into intense flames, radiating a searing wave of energy. He charged forward, threatening the safety of the villagers and forcing Ray to fight seriously. The two clashed, creating energy waves that shook the entire village and destroyed the nearby buildings. As the dust settled, Atra was stunned to see that Ray was completely unharmed, even after taking his most powerful attack head-on. The mage placed a hand on Atra, unleashing a powerful, concentrated blast of magic that sent him flying. Atra got back up, bewildered, asking why the boy would waste the perfect opportunity to finish him off. Ray just looked at him with a steady gaze, reflecting on the knight's strength and determination. He asked why Atra needed to ally himself with werewolves, reminding him of his cries for death. As if Atra was still lost in his despair, determined to reach his heart, Ray tried to stop the fight, reasoning that if they continued, Atra's precious memories would be reduced to ashes. He urged Atra to remember the faces of his loved ones, but this only deepened Atra's pain, and he was ready to strike again. Just then, Liana suddenly screamed as she fell down, and all eyes turned to Shu and Liz, the two children being held hostage by a wolf. Refusing to let things end there, the monster ordered Atra to block Ray's path. Looking closer, they noticed the wolf had regenerated its severed limbs, and now it looked completely abnormal. The wolf quickly dashed off with the two children, trying to escape the village. Ray saw they were getting too far from the sacred gate and realized the wolf was about to escape. He shouted Atra's name, asking if he had truly lost so much that he had nothing left to protect. He reminded him of Atra's kindness towards Shu and Liz. As he thought about the children, images of his own children's smiles flashed through Atra's mind, followed by the image of his wife who had once told him to use his strength to protect the villagers. Gritting his teeth, Atra focused his magical power once more. His family was important, but so were the children and the villagers. His resolve to protect them renewed, he launched his spear, sending it flying past the wolf and straight toward the sacred gate. The monster told him he should have aimed properly, but it didn't expect that the sacred gate had been reactivated, blocking its escape route. Before the wolf could realize what was happening, Ray appeared in a flash, slashing the wolf's arms and saving the two children. Then he threw the spear back up, and Atra caught it from above and dove down, piercing the wolf's chest, causing the monster to collapse as the battle finally came to an end. He breathed a sigh of relief and was surprised. when the two children ran up and hugged him tightly, thanking him for saving their lives. Atra didn't understand why the children were thanking him, but Ray also expressed his gratitude, admitting it was his fault for leaving the children unprotected. He said that if Atra hadn't reactivated the gate and acted from the heart to save them, the children might not have survived. Ray held out his hand and asked Atra if he had found his answer. Looking down, Atra closed his eyes, remembering his family and all the villagers. He took Ray's hand, admitting his failure and finally finding his true purpose. Just then, the captain saw the corpse of a half-eaten rabbit nearby and noticed many other animal carcasses that had also been eaten by monsters. And feeling a sense of foreboding, he quickly urged his soldiers on. Atra accepted his failure, looking at the children with a benevolent gaze, and turned to apologize to Ray, who simply smiled, knowing that Atra had finally found his purpose. Shu and Liz ran off, leaving Atra and Ray to have a more serious conversation. Atra informed him that the Holy Knights were on their way to the village and would arrest him as a dangerous criminal. You will be imprisoned in the Forbidden Abyss, a place guarded by the Vicrador clan, where the most vicious criminals and fearsome monsters are held, sealed away forever, never to see the light of day. Thinking about this, Ray instinctively thought of Loki, but then pushed the thought away. He felt a pang of regret, thinking that if they had arrived sooner, perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented. Atra advised Ray not to dwell on what had passed, saying there was no reason to cling to the past. After that, he sincerely thanked Ray for helping him protect the things that were important. Ray smiled, glad that the power from Yggdrasil not only made him stronger, but could also be used to save many people. They both returned to the village and saw that the villagers were ready with anything they could use as a weapon, prepared for whatever might happen. Atra looked around and asked Ray to watch over the villagers until the knights arrived. He suggested telling them that he had died at the hands of the wolves, to protect the villagers from a death sentence for the crime of killing the guardian of the sacred tree, because if the news reached the kingdom, all the villagers would be executed. Atra knelt, accepting his death, but the village chief apologized instead, saying that he could have prevented the tragedy if only he had listened to his suffering sooner. Atra replied that he was the one who had caused so many deaths, and he was ready to accept responsibility for their revenge. However, the old man shook his head, admitting that while most people probably hated him, no one had any intention of killing him. Shinoka, standing in the crowd with tears in her eyes, confessed that while she could never forgive him for letting the wolves take her husband's life and for allying with them, she was also grateful to Atra for saving Shu and Liz, and for protecting the village for so long. She and the villagers wanted to offer him their sincere thanks. Atra, stunned by everyone's kindness, couldn't hold back his tears as he realized there were still people who cared about him. Before the people he cherished, he bowed his head in remorse and guilt. Although he had committed terrible crimes, the villagers couldn't help but feel pity for their gatekeeper, who had also suffered so much. The lingering pain became the motivation to move on. With the villagers' forgiveness, Atra and everyone looked toward the future together. The village chief thanked Ray for saving the village and helping to evacuate the people. Although Liana tried to humbly refuse the praise, Ray urged her to bow her head and accept their thanks. Just then, a squad of soldiers arrived late. Among them was Captain Terazid of the Royal Knight Order. He looked around, saw the bodies of the wolves, and was relieved to see that Ray and Atra were still safe. Captain Terazid's attention turned to Ray, and he requested a detailed account of what had happened. They retreated to a private room for a deeper discussion. The captain thought it over carefully, acknowledging that there were many factors to consider, including the oppression the villagers had endured. Though he didn't want to, he reluctantly signed a document. He had no other choice, as Atra had already accepted his fate. Terazed would take the story back to the capital, and Atra would be tried for his crimes. Knowing Atra well, Terazed believed his actions were driven by a powerful conviction. He advised Atra to atone for his sins in prison, because according to the law, those who possess sacred power cannot be sentenced to death. Turning to Ray, the captain asked him to tell his side of the story, apologizing at the same time, knowing Ray must be exhausted after fighting the pack of wolves. He couldn't help but be surprised by Ray's combat abilities, despite him being a white mage. Terazid was even more astonished to learn he had once been part of the Gunkano party, and was surprised that he had recognized him. Captain Terazid introduced himself as a ruby rank knight who often works with adventurers and takes note of high-ranking parties. Ray was surprised to be recognized, having disappeared 5 years ago. Moreover, his old party had just been promoted to S rank only 1 month ago, while he thought they were still A rank. Ray admitted that he was no longer involved with the party. Hearing this, Terazed guessed that he didn't know what had happened in the dungeon. He shared that they had encountered an S rank monster and suffered serious injuries, with the exception of the white mage. Ray fell silent, thinking about his old party and the ones who had betrayed him, who were now suffering from grievous wounds. The day he was abandoned had planted the seeds of hatred in him. But after meeting Norn and becoming stronger, he no longer cared about them. Or so he thought. Now his feelings were complicated. Tarazed pulled him back to reality, recalling Ray's talent as a mage and asking why he had left the party. Ray refused to be called talented, saying his healing abilities were incomplete and revealing that he had been expelled. This took the knights by surprise, and the captain couldn't keep his composure, thinking his old party must have been blind to abandon someone like him. Suddenly struck by an idea, he moved closer to Ray, unexpectedly inviting him to join his unit with a friendly demeanor. However, his members looked at him with exasperation, accustomed to their captain's impulsive nature, reminding him that he shouldn't just recruit people on a whim. As royal knights, they held high authority and often became arrogant. Furthermore, Tarazed was a ruby rank knight, the second highest rank, yet he was never complacent. Tarazed took out a piece of paper, handing it to Ray, saying it was for 300 gold coins, the reward for exterminating the wolves. This rather large sum could be exchanged for cash in the capital. Ray, who hadn't done it for the reward, refused it and suggested using the reward to rebuild the village. Delighted by Ray's benevolence, Tarazed once again invited him to join the squad, but he quickly composed himself under the reproachful gazes of his comrades. The knights had already intended to rebuild the village and find a new guardian for the divine tree, as well as repair the divine gate, which was damaged from being shut in a hurry. They both thanked Ray, but he insisted that he was the one who should be grateful since they had stopped Atra without taking his life. Tarazed tried to convince Ray to accept a reward as a token of their gratitude, and in the end, he accepted. Together they began to work on rebuilding the village. Afterward, Tarazed asked for a detailed explanation about the demon that had corrupted Atra. He invited Ray to listen as well so he could better understand. The one who pulled Atra into darkness was Alfurk, one of the 4 great demon lords, a trusted subordinate of the Demon King, all of whom are triple S rank creatures. Atra had encountered one of Alfurk's underlings, which caused him to lose control of his emotions. Tarazed pondered the mechanics of that power, while Ray wondered why he was being told this story. Atra revealed that they were targeting him, and that the wolves had been ordered not to engage with Ray, as he could become an obstacle for them. However, this news didn't surprise him. He already knew he was being watched and thanked Atra for clarifying things. Although he had guessed it was a high-ranking demon, the fact that his observer was one of the top demons in the kingdom was not a pleasant prospect. Meanwhile, Jimeno screamed in agony, crying out for someone to light up the area around her. Her handmaidens tried to calm her, gently informing her that the area was already well lit and no more light was needed. She began to question the darkness before her eyes, and slowly remembered the dungeon expedition where she had lost both her eyes. The shock hit her, and she refused to accept the reality of what she had become. Desperate for help, she remembered her former healer and silently called out to Ray, hoping he could help her once more.